Brothers and sisters, what I am about to tell you could change the way you see faith, because many times we doubt the power of faith and what it is capable of accomplishing. We often forget the words of our Lord about how our faith can move mountains. No, it is not just a metaphor. Faith is truly capable of achieving the impossible. And today, I ask for your attention, because Don Bosco shows us how prayer and trust in God can truly work extraordinary wonders in our daily lives. If you doubt this, if you think it is impossible, I ask you to take just a few minutes to listen to this incredible story, which actually happened and was recorded in the biographical memoirs by Don Lemoyne, who recounts the words of the assistant parish priest, Don Marchisio, a direct witness to the events. This is a story of hope, of unwavering faith, and of a divine response that no one could have foreseen. But before we dive into this story that will leave you speechless, let me briefly introduce Don Bosco. Giovanni Bosco, known as Don Bosco, was a 19th century Italian priest, founder of the Salesian congregation, and a loving father to young people. His life was a continuous gift to others, inspired by a steadfast and unwavering faith in divine providence. He was a man who not only taught the gospel, but lived it every day with miracles that testified to God's love. Now, let us return to our story. We are in Italy, in a small town in Piedmont called Montemagno. In those days of 1864, Montemagno was struck by a relentless drought. For 3 long months, the sky had refused to grant even a single drop of rain to the parched fields. Countless prayers had been offered, both public and private, but all seemed to fall upon deaf ears. The farmers were beginning to despair, resigned to losing their entire harvest. It was then that Don Bosco, invited to preach, stood in the pulpit and declared firmly,
"If you devoutly participate in these 3 days of preaching, if you reconcile with God through a sincere confession, and if, on the feast day of the Assumption of Mary, you all receive Holy Communion, I promise you, in the name of Our Lady, that the rain will fall abundantly to bless your fields."
His words touched hearts, stirring a sincere response among the faithful. But something strange happened. Don Bosco, carried away by the fervor of his preaching, had not realized he had made such a bold promise. His words seemed to have been dictated by a higher force. In the sacristy, the parish priest, Don Clivio, approached him with a mix of amazement and disbelief. "You were truly courageous. You promised rain in front of everyone," he said. Don Bosco, surprised, replied, "Did I really say that?" "Certainly," insisted the priest. "Everyone heard those exact words. In the name of Mary, I promise you that if you make a good confession, the rain will come." Don Bosco, incredulous, said, "No, you must have misunderstood. I don't remember saying that. I refuse to believe it." The parish priest told him to ask the faithful. And indeed, Don Bosco realized that he had indeed promised in front of everyone that rain would soon arrive. The faithful of Montemagno were deeply moved by Don Bosco's words. They were a rural community, dependent on the fruits of the land, and the drought was a tragedy that affected all families. Don Bosco's words ignited hope and renewed faith, prompting everyone to follow his guidance, making profound examinations of conscience and flocking to the church in such large numbers that there were barely enough confessors to accommodate them. As you can imagine, the news spread quickly. While Montemagno was preparing spiritually with confessions and prayers, in the nearby towns, people mocked the prediction. In Grana, a small town near Montemagno, they even organized a dance to celebrate what many considered an inevitable failure. Days passed and the rain did not come. In fact, the heat grew even more intense. The faithful approached Don Bosco and asked him about the rain, to which he repeatedly replied, "Remove sin, and the rain will come." But then came the day of the Feast of the Assumption of Mary, and the sky remained relentlessly clear. The increasingly oppressive heat seemed to mock Don Bosco's words. All of this made Don Bosco more and more uneasy. Thoughtfully, he withdrew to his room and prayed fervently. From his window, he could hear the sound of trumpets coming from the festivities in Grana, and in town, some had already prepared protests against him. Don Bosco pondered how he could justify the unfulfilled promise, what words he could use to reassure the faithful. When he arrived in the sacristy, he found the Marquis Fossati waiting for him. Approaching him, the Marquis said, "Don Bosco, this time you've failed. You promised rain, but there is anything but rain here." Although he appeared calm, deep inside, Don Bosco was very worried about the promise he had made and how he would soon have to explain the lack of rain. He then decided to call the sacristan and asked him to run to Baron Garofoli's castle, from where he could better observe the sky and see if there were any signs that might indicate possible rain. The young man ran quickly, but returned with little encouragement. "The sky is clear, only a small cloud on the horizon, shaped almost like the shadow of a shoe." Don Bosco took his stole for the celebration, and once again some faithful approached him, asking what they should do if the rain did not come. At this point, Don Bosco replied that it would be a sign that they did not deserve it. Climbing the pulpit, Don Bosco was now very worried. His heart turned to the Blessed Mother, and he prayed, "Most Holy Mother, it is not my honor at stake, but yours. What will the mockers say if the hopes of these faithful, who have done their best, are disappointed?" From the pulpit, he looked out at the church. It was as full as perhaps it had never been before, and all eyes were fixed on him. He began with the Hail Mary, and after just a few words, it seemed to him that the sunlight was slightly less intense. Shortly after, he heard a prolonged sound, similar to that of thunder. A murmur of amazement spread through the church. Many had heard it. The doubts of the faithful melted away when another thunderclap followed shortly after, and then another. Suddenly, the rain began to fall heavily, pounding on the windows and the parched streets. The faithful burst into tears of joy, while Don Bosco, moved, thanked the Blessed Mother for the grace received with words that touched the hearts of all present. But something even more extraordinary and unique happened, a sign that even the most skeptical could not deny. The rain fell only on the small town of Montemagno. In the surrounding villages, the drought continued, and in Grana, where skeptics had organized a celebration to mock Don Bosco's words, a devastating hailstorm destroyed the crops, leaving the scoffers speechless. Brothers and sisters, these events are not the product of a fanciful storyteller, but truly took place on the Feast of the Assumption of Mary in 1864. This story teaches us that sincere faith can indeed change our lives and work unexpected miracles. God never abandons those who entrust themselves to Him with a humble and trusting heart. How many times do we allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by doubt and despair when, instead, we could simply place our trust in His providence? Never doubt the power of faith and God's help, because as Don Bosco has shown us, not only does God never abandon us, but faith can achieve the impossible. Even in the most difficult trials, when life seems to push us beyond our limits, faith sustains us, guides us, and allows us to overcome every obstacle. If this story has touched your heart, share it with your loved ones. Perhaps someone close to you needs to hear this testimony of hope and faith. Leave a comment with your own experience of faith. Tell us how God has worked in your life because your story could inspire someone else. Finally, subscribe to our channel to hear more extraordinary stories that show us the power of God in our everyday lives. May God bless us all.